Brielle Monroe, 32. That's the name on my badge at the Jefferson High 10-year reunion, printed in clean black letters above a photo I swear I took during one of the worst months of my life. The gym looks the same. Scuffed floors, folding tables with cheese platters, a bar hastily set up by the PTA, and a DJ who thinks 2012 was the peak of civilization. I'm standing near the punch bowl, sipping something vaguely cranberry-flavored when I hear it. That laugh. That unmistakable, nasal, smug-as-ever laugh. Jacob Reeves. I don't even have to turn around to know it's him. My stomach tightens out of instinct before my brain catches up. And sure enough, there he is. Same 2 white teeth. Same overconfident strut. Same cheap cologne he thought made him smell expensive. He's holding court near the bleachers, talking about some logistics startup he's running. Apparently, it's on the verge of exploding. I bite back a smile. The last time he said that, it was about his investment in NFTs. He sees me before I can escape. Brielle? He says, tilting his head. Wow, didn't expect to see you here? I nod. Likewise. We exchange fake pleasantries. He asks where I'm living, what I'm doing. I tell him, truthfully but vaguely, that I'm building a finance app. His smile stretches. Still chasing those big dreams, huh? He says, chuckling. You always had ideas. No offense, but I figured by now you'd be teaching art or something. Didn't you major in design? I did, I say calmly. Then I learned to code. He raises his eyebrows like I've just told him I learned Mandarin over lunch. Huh, good for you. But that app stuff? That's a tough racket. Everyone wants to be the next Elon. I nod again, like I haven't heard this exact condescension 100 times before. True, but someone has to be. He laughs again, louder this time. Well, hey, if it works out, let me know. I might invest, or maybe hire you someday. He winks. I smile, slow and practiced. Maybe. He doesn't ask for my number. He doesn't even remember the way he dumped me sophomore year after I refused to drop out and join his founder's team for a vape startup. That failed, by the way. Just like the travel app. And the dropshipping business. He doesn't know I've already closed my Series A. He doesn't know my name's starting to buzz in private VC circles. He doesn't know a single damn thing. But he will. And when he does, it won't be with a reunion badge and fake champagne. It'll be across a boardroom table. And I'll make sure he remembers every single laugh. The thing about being called a loser by someone you used to love is that it doesn't hit all at once. It spreads, like a slow leak under drywall. You don't see the damage right away, but you feel it in the silence afterward. The way you second-guess yourself in every meeting. The way you pause before hitting send. The way your voice catches in your own throat when you talk about your dreams, like there's something fragile. Jacob called me that the night he left. We were sitting on the ripped corduroy couch in his off-campus apartment, half-eaten takeout on the coffee table, and his business textbooks scattered around like landmines. He'd just gotten back from some entrepreneurship seminar, eyes blazing with buzzwords like disruption and hypergrowth. I can't do this anymore, he said, brushing a cold fry off his lap like it offended him. You're too comfortable playing small. Art degrees and passion projects? That's not how real success happens. I asked him what that meant. He sighed like I'd missed the point. You talk about changing the world, Brielle, but you've got no plan. You're all talk. And I can't drag dead weight. Dead weight. That's what he saw when he looked at me. A girl with sketchbooks and a part-time job at the campus bookstore. Not a partner, not a risk worth taking. Just a detour on his path to being the next Zuckerberg. He packed his stuff the next day. Left a note, like we were strangers. I cried once. Just once, then got angry. And then, I got to work. I buried myself in UI/UX courses. I took on freelance gigs nobody else wanted, designing mobile interfaces for apps that barely worked. I learned to read code. Not just front end, but the gritty back end stuff that made my eyes blur. I built my own website from scratch. Ugly as hell, but mine. I studied algorithms the way Jacob had studied power. And when my loans came due and I couldn't keep up, I moved into my best friend Maya's basement with a mattress on the floor and Wi-Fi that only worked in the kitchen. That was 4 years ago. No salary, no investors. Just me, my laptop, and a whiteboard covered in ideas. And somehow, in that dingy little space with silverfish in the corners and pipes that rattled every time the heat kicked in, the first version of Mint was born. A smart budgeting app built by a girl who once couldn't afford dinner and a tank of gas in the same week. Jacob never saw the fire he lit, but it's been burning ever since. There's a particular kind of silence that settles over a house at 2 a.m., when the world is asleep, but your ambition isn't. Maya's basement was always cold, the kind of cold that seeps through your socks and turns your breath visible if the space heater's off. I got used to it. Started keeping fingerless gloves next to my keyboard, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders like armor. That basement? It became my war room. I'd set up my workspace in the far corner near the dryer with a fold-out table Maya got from a garage sale and a rickety IKEA chair that gave me back spasms after too many hours. There was no window, but I taped a picture of a city skyline above my monitor, my vision board in a single snapshot. The future I was building toward, even if it felt impossibly far away. I called the project Mint because it was the kind of name Jacob would have mocked. Too cute, too feminine, too light. But it stuck with me. It felt clean, fresh, like a reset. The app started as a simple budgeting tracker with intuitive visual layouts for people who hated numbers. People like me, who wanted financial freedom but felt overwhelmed by jargon and spreadsheets. Every day I clocked in at my real job, a contract designer for a wellness blog, and then clocked into Mint at night. I coded until my fingers cramped. Taught myself database architecture off Reddit and YouTube. Fought off imposter syndrome like it was my full-time job. Some nights I cried. Others I felt invincible. But through it all, I never stopped. When I hit my first 1,000 downloads, just 3 months after the beta launch, I nearly threw up. I remember staring at the screen, hand trembling over the mouse. I refreshed the analytics 5 times to make sure it wasn't a glitch. Then I screamed so loud Maya ran downstairs with a baseball bat. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the mattress in the corner, staring at the water-stained ceiling, heart pounding. Something had shifted. People were using it. Not just downloading it out of pity or support, but actually using it. And emailing me, with feedback, praise, suggestions. It wasn't just an app anymore. It was proof. I wasn't a pipe dream. I wasn't dead weight. I was building something real. And somewhere out there, Jacob was still sitting in glassy boardrooms, probably pitching investors on ideas he stole from someone smarter. That was the difference between us. He waited for doors to open. I was building mine with blistered hands. The first time I walked into a venture capital meeting wearing heels that hurt and a blazer I bought secondhand off Poshmark, I felt like a fraud. I'd practiced my pitch until my voice went hoarse, rewritten my deck more times than I could count, and still, my stomach knotted the second the receptionist said, "They're ready for you." The conference room was sterile and sleek. Glass walls, reclaimed wood table, a row of men in Patagonia vests and Rolex watches pretending to be relaxed. One of them glanced at his phone as I set up. Another gave me a tight-lipped smile like he'd already decided I wasn't worth the time. But I didn't flinch. I clicked to slide one and said, "Let me tell you why Mint is going to change the way women handle their money." That got their attention. Not because they believed me, but because I didn't flounder. I spoke with clarity, with lived experience. I didn't talk numbers first. I talked pain points. I told them about growing up watching my mom hide grocery receipts in her purse. About having to Google how to cancel overdraft fees. About the shame that comes with financial confusion and how no budgeting app out there truly got it. By slide 10, they stopped checking their phones. By the final graph, our user retention curve, they leaned forward. After the Q&A, one of them asked, "Why now? Why not wait another year and refine the product more?" I looked him dead in the eye. Because women have waited long enough. They didn't give me an answer that day. But 2 weeks later, I got the call. $2.8 million in seed funding. Just like that. My company had investors. My basement office turned into a real one. Top floor of a WeWork downtown, with exposed brick and sunlight that poured in like a reward. I hired a small team. 3 women, all scrappy and brilliant, and just as tired of being overlooked as I was. We worked like hell. Tweaked the UI, added new features, negotiated partnerships with credit unions and women-led financial blogs. We didn't have a ping pong table or kombucha on tap, but we had purpose. Minty started trending in the App Store's personal finance category by month 6. Financial influencers started reviewing it. Emails poured in. I finally understand my budget. Your app helped me pay off 2 credit cards. I wish this existed 5 years ago. One night, we hit 100,000 users. I stood in the middle of our tiny office holding a plastic champagne glass and realized I wasn't pretending anymore. I was exactly who I said I'd be. Rich? Not quite. But real? Undeniably. And Jacob Reeves had no idea that the girl he laughed at had just built the thing that was about to rip the rug out from under him. I wasn't looking for him. Not really. But you know how it goes. Once you start making moves, the universe has a way of dropping names you haven't heard in years, like ghosts with bad timing. Jacob Reeves popped up on LinkedIn first. Someone in my network liked a post from his company, Reeves Logistics Solutions. The name sounded made up, like a fake firm you'd see in a movie. I clicked anyway. The page looked polished. Big words, sleek branding, photos of Jacob in a too-tight suit standing next to shipping containers like he personally delivered them across oceans. Innovative, scalable, disruptive. The usual nonsense, but I wasn't interested in the buzzwords. I was looking at the numbers, and something didn't add up. The company had just laid off 1/3 of their staff. Quietly, of course. No press release, just a few ex-employees updating their profiles with open-to-work banners and soft goodbyes. I noticed the shift in their tone. One woman wrote, "Excited for what's next." Translation: they were blindsided. The deeper I dug, the more cracks I found. Client turnover, delayed payments, a warehouse partnership that mysteriously vanished from their website. Their app, which promised real-time freight tracking, was pulling abysmal reviews, with comments like, "doesn't load," "buggy as hell," and "pretty sure my shipment fell off the face of the earth." And then I saw it. Jacob was pitching for Series B funding. I nearly laughed. He was bleeding money, clinging to buzz, trying to raise capital on a brand that had already burned through its credibility. And yet, he still had that same smug confidence. The same delusional belief that his charm would bail him out again. But this time, I was watching. And not just watching. I was circling. I called Maya that night. She answered with her usual, "If it's not about wine or money, I'm hanging up." "It's both," I said. "Guess who's about to drown in logistics debt?" She didn't miss a beat. "Jacob?" Bingo. There was a pause. "Are you planning something?" I looked out the window of my high-rise office, the city blinking beneath me like a constellation of unfinished business. "Not yet," I said. Because revenge isn't served cold, it's served slow, controlled, timed to the second. He had no idea that the girl he once dumped over cheap Chinese takeout was now the CEO of a thriving tech company with the capital and connections to take his down brick by brick. And I wasn't going to lift a finger. Not yet. I'd just let him rot a little longer. Let him sweat. Because the best kind of revenge? It walks in smiling, with receipts. The invitation came in a cream envelope with embossed gold lettering and an RSVP link that screamed exclusive. It was a local business leadership panel hosted downtown, one of those networking events where everyone pretends to be humble while subtly name-dropping their Series A and golf club memberships. Normally, I'd pass. But when I saw the list of speakers, I froze. Jacob Reeves, CEO, Reeves Logistics Solutions. It was too perfect. I registered under my legal name, Brielle Monroe. No company affiliation listed. Let him figure it out later. The night of the event, I wore a fitted black dress and a navy blazer. Subtle but sharp. Enough to blend in with the crowd, but stand out when it mattered. I slipped into the second row of the conference room just as the moderator introduced the panel. Jacob took the stage like he owned the building. He wore a tailored suit this time, probably the most expensive thing he had left. He smiled like a man who still thought he was on top. That same slick, over-rehearsed confidence I remembered from college debates, when he'd speak in circles and still win points just for sounding decisive. He started with a monologue about navigating uncertain markets. His voice was smooth, hands expressive, tone just serious enough to sound intelligent without saying anything of actual substance. He dropped phrases like lean growth and asset-light logistics, which probably meant his company couldn't afford trucks anymore. When it came time for audience questions, I raised my hand. The moderator pointed. Yes, second row. I stood slowly. Brielle Monroe, no company affiliation. I saw it then, the flicker in his eyes. Recognition. Not full, not yet, but something. A crack in the glass. My question is for Mr. Reeves. You've spoken about innovation in logistics. Can you walk us through how your company's technology addresses user pain points, especially given the recent negative feedback about tracking delays on your platform? Silence. A pause just long enough to draw attention. Jacob cleared his throat. Well, every startup faces hiccups during expansion. We're actively refining the user experience based on feedback. But isn't it true your last 3 warehouse partners terminated contracts due to unresolved software issues? I asked, tilting my head. That's not just a hiccup. That's systemic. The room shifted. People turned. Pens hovered above notepads. His jaw tightened. I'm afraid I can't speak to internal operations at this time, he said through gritted teeth. Of course not, I said, smiling. Thank you. I sat down, his eyes following me, and that's when it clicked. He knew. I didn't say anything else that night. I let him sweat through the rest of the panel, dodging more questions, trying to recover. When the event ended, I slipped out before he could corner me. Let him wonder what I was doing there. Let him guess who I'd become. He had no idea that the next time he'd see my face, it wouldn't be in the audience. It'd be in the boardroom. And I wouldn't be raising my hand. I'd be raising the stakes. I'm not a vengeful person. At least, that's what I used to tell myself. But something shifts when you've spent years being underestimated, when you've quietly built an empire brick by brick while people like Jacob breeze through doors held open by ego and empty charm. Watching him on that panel, stammering through answers he didn't prepare for, felt like flipping to the first page of a new book, the kind I was writing. The next morning, I called Lauren, my company's CFO and one of the sharpest minds I've ever worked with. She was sipping espresso in our office kitchen, already knee-deep in spreadsheets. I want to see inside Reeves Logistics, I said. She raised an eyebrow, then slid her mug onto the counter. Are we talking gossip or acquisition? Intelligence, I replied, but keep acquisition on the table. Lauren grinned. Let me put on my spy hat. Within a week, we had more than we needed. One of Jacob's investors, an overextended angel desperate to liquidate, was willing to talk. Under NDA, of course. For the right price, we got access to just enough of the company's financials to see the truth behind the smoke and mirrors. Reeves Logistics was a mess. Negative cash flow for 5 consecutive quarters, missed payroll twice last year, lawsuits from former vendors, half-finished software upgrades bleeding money like open wounds. And despite it all, Jacob was still funneling cash into glossy branding campaigns and first-class conference trips like it was 2018 and Uber was still cool. This man's running a startup like it's a frat party, Lauren said, sliding the file toward me. And he's out of beer, I replied, flipping through the damage. But I didn't gloat. I strategized. We formed a shell company, Cedar Creek Holdings, a clean slate with no ties to Mint, no red flags, no scent of revenge. Cedar Creek started quiet, acquiring small shares from anxious stakeholders and whispering interest to advisors close to the board. We weren't hostile, We were interested, curious, patient. And Jacob? He didn't suspect a thing. He was too busy pitching to new investors, giving interviews, and pretending everything was fine. He probably thought the slight drop in stock valuation was market noise. Probably blamed interns or bad timing or Mercury retrograde. I was building my leverage with surgical precision. No emotion, no press, just paperwork, signatures, and positioning. It wasn't about getting even anymore. It was about setting the stage. Because when the final play came, and it wouldn't just end with me on top. It would end with him realizing I had been in control this entire time. And by the time the mask came off, the company wouldn't be his to save. It would be mine to bury, or rebirth, on my terms. The deal closed on a Thursday, a quiet, unremarkable Thursday. No headlines, no press releases, no champagne. Just a secured conference call, a few wire transfers, and the final signature that handed over controlling interest of Reeves Logistics Solutions to Cedar Creek Holdings. My holdings, my company. Jacob didn't even know he'd sold his soul to me. I remember sitting alone in my office that night, staring at the final document on my screen. My name wasn't on it, not directly. That was the point. Every piece of this had been layered with intention, legally sound, emotionally airtight. If Jacob ever tried to claim I manipulated the deal, all he'd find was a chain of clean corporate handoffs, board votes, and market opportunism. By the book, my book. Lauren knocked and let herself in, holding 2 glasses of whiskey. "You did it," she said, handing one to me. "You own him." I clinked my glass to hers. "No," I said. "I own the company. He's just collateral." We toasted to silence. Reeves Logistics still operated as usual on the surface. Same logo, same leadership team, same clueless CEO sitting in the corner office. But internally, the structure shifted. My people started showing up in meetings. One by one, I replaced old board members with advisors loyal to Cedar Creek. We installed oversight, initiated internal audits. Departments started reporting back to me. Jacob noticed. Of course he did. At first, he probably thought the changes were temporary. New blood to streamline operations. I imagine he pitched it to his staff that way. Probably said it was all part of a strategic growth initiative. It wasn't. It was the beginning of his end. Still, I waited. I showed up to nothing. I kept my name buried in layers of LLCs and holding groups. I didn't even step foot inside his office tower. Not yet. I wanted him to feel the shift before seeing the storm. He must have felt the walls closing in. The approval he used to get with a wink now required signatures. His late invoices were flagged. His executive decisions were overridden. He couldn't throw around buzzwords and bypass protocol anymore. Real systems were being installed, real accountability, and real people, mine, were watching. One of our first internal memos was a directive for department heads to forward questionable expenditures directly to Cedar Creek oversight. The next day, Jacob tried to expense a $4,200 client lunch at a steakhouse in Manhattan. It was denied. Publicly. He threw a fit in the finance meeting, according to my contact in accounting. Red-faced, demanding answers, citing founder rights and historical precedent. But none of that mattered anymore. Because Jacob Reeves was no longer the founder in charge. He was just an employee now. And I was his boss. He just didn't know it yet. It happened on a Monday, because of course it did. Mondays are made for quiet revolutions. Jacob was mid-presentation in the Reeves Logistics boardroom, talking to the leadership team about some new initiative he called Hypertrack 360. From what I heard later, it was a rebranded version of an old idea that had already failed once. But he was pitching it like it was the second coming of Amazon. Charts, buzzwords, a demo that didn't load. He was still talking when the boardroom door opened, and I walked in. For a moment, the room froze. Then a few people shifted in their chairs. I made my way to the head of the table, heels clicking softly against the polished floor, and placed my leather folder down in front of me. Jacob stared. His voice stalled mid-sentence. His eyes flicked to the others, waiting for someone to explain what I was doing here. "Sorry to interrupt," I said smoothly, unbuttoning my coat, "but I think it's time we all get properly introduced." He blinked, still not quite computing. "I'm Brielle Monroe, founder of Minty, and as of this morning, acting CEO of Reeves Logistics." The silence that followed was thick enough to chew. Someone coughed. Another board member nodded slowly, like pieces were finally clicking together. Jacob looked like he'd been slapped. "What are you talking about?" he finally said, voice brittle. I slid the file across the table. Cedar Creek Holdings acquired controlling interest over the past 4 months. This is the documentation outlining the transition of leadership, board restructuring, and your updated employment contract. He snatched the folder, flipping through it like he might find a typo that would save him. "You can't do this." "Oh, I can," I said, folding my hands neatly. And I did. All above board, all legal. You signed off on most of it yourself, without realizing it, of course. His jaw clenched. "This is personal." "It's business," I said calmly. "The personal part? That ended 10 years ago when you called me a loser and told me I'd never make it." He stood abruptly, the chair screeching behind him. "You blindsided me." I smiled. "So we're even." He looked around the room, searching for backup, but no one moved. No one came to his rescue. The team had already felt the shift. They'd seen what competent leadership looked like. They weren't going to bat for the man who'd run the company into the ground with ego and empty promises. I stood too. "You're welcome to stay on as head of product innovation, at a reduced salary, of course, or you can walk out now. But if you choose the latter, I'll need your badge and your NDA signed before security escorts you out." He stared at me. I stared back. And for the first time, Jacob Reeves saw me not as a woman he once dismissed, but as the storm he never saw coming. He didn't quit that day. I could tell he wanted to. His pride practically begged for a dramatic exit. But ego's a funny thing. It doesn't always drive people to leave. Sometimes it traps them, makes them stay in rooms where they've already lost, just to convince themselves they haven't. So Jacob stayed, and I let him. For weeks, I watched him stumble through meetings, clinging to authority that didn't exist anymore. He'd barge into departments unannounced, offer visionary feedback, and try to remind everyone he was still the founder. But the staff had already adapted. They came to me now. When I spoke, they listened. When he did, they tolerated. It was a quiet unraveling, and I didn't rush it. That's the thing about long games. They require patience, precision. You don't crush someone like Jacob with one swift blow. You let them rot in their own irrelevance. I changed the approval hierarchy first. All strategic decisions now required a C-suite vote, which he no longer held. Then I restructured the product roadmap to eliminate Hypertrack 360, the fantasy project he kept trying to resurrect. He pitched it one last time in a Thursday sync meeting, and I let him finish, then calmly redirected the team's attention to a competitor analysis that exposed how obsolete the concept was. He didn't speak for the rest of the hour. One afternoon, I caught him trying to schedule an off-the-books meeting with a potential client. I flagged it immediately. When confronted, he acted shocked, like it was a simple misunderstanding. "It was just a coffee," he said. "Then you won't mind if I sit in next time," I replied. He did mind, of course, but he didn't say it. Not out loud. He was unraveling. His authority chipped away day by day. Not by force, but by structure. Process, accountability. The very things he used to ignore were now the tools I used to erase him. And still, I didn't fire him. Not yet. Because firing someone like Jacob isn't just about removing them. It's about when you do it. Timing is everything. You wait for the moment that matters. The moment he believes, just for a second, that he's clawed back control. You wait for an audience. And you wait until it hurts. Really hurts. Because I didn't just want to take his title. I wanted to take his narrative. The one where he's always the one walking away first. Not this time. It was almost too easy. By the time we hit Q3, Jacob was hanging on by threads he didn't even know had already been cut. He still strutted through the office like he mattered, still CC'd himself on project emails like anyone cared. But behind the scenes, I was building the final case. An airtight, board-approved removal package he couldn't squirm out of even if he tried. And he would try. I knew that. He always had a story, a spin, a scapegoat. But not this time. Our legal team compiled the documents, expense reports flagged with personal dinners disguised as client meetings, unauthorized travel, overriding junior staff on product decisions without approval. He wasn't malicious, just arrogant. The kind of man who thought consequences were suggestions. I let him rack it all up. He ignored protocol, signed off on a faulty warehouse integration that lost a 5-figure shipment, sent a passive-aggressive email chain to the product team accusing them of lacking hustle, tried to implement a bonus structure that exclusively benefited department heads he liked. Every move he made was a chess piece, and every one of them played right into my plan. When I met with the board behind closed doors, I didn't bring emotion. I brought facts, dates, memos, misdirected funds, screenshot evidence, recorded complaints. His digital fingerprints were all over every misstep. Technically, I said, I could let this spiral, let the damage grow until we have cause for a full legal dismissal. One board member leaned forward. And what are you proposing instead? I smiled. A clean break, high profile, controlled, and symbolic. The vote was unanimous. Still, I waited a week. Let him breathe. Let him walk the office halls, oblivious. Let him enjoy the illusion of power for just a little longer. And in that week, I picked the moment. A company-wide event. Family day. Team-building games. Food trucks. Face paint. Little kids running around in tiny t-shirts with the company logo. Jacob would be there. He never missed a chance to show off for a crowd, especially in front of his kids. I didn't take pleasure in that part, not really. But I knew what it would mean to him. He once told me during finals week, half drunk on arrogance and coffee, that winning is about who commands the room. He was right. And soon he'd find out exactly what it feels like to be commanded. Because the stage was almost set, and next time he stood in the spotlight, I'd be the one holding the script. Family day arrived with sunshine, bouncy castles, and catered tacos. The courtyard outside our headquarters had been transformed into something out of a corporate Pinterest board. Face painting stations, a mini petting zoo, branded balloons swaying in the breeze. It was wholesome, charming, the perfect distraction. Exactly what I needed. I wore soft beige slacks and a silk blouse. Approachable, friendly, CEO but not intimidating. I walked the grounds, smiling for photos, shaking hands with spouses I didn't know, high-fiving toddlers. Meanwhile, my legal team finalized the last of the documents in my office upstairs. The termination packet sat printed, clipped neatly inside a manila folder with Jacob's name on the tab. He arrived around noon, 2 sons in tow. I watched from across the lot as he held a hot dog in one hand and pointed out the balloon arch with the other. He looked normal, casual, like a man still living in the fantasy that he was admired, respected, safe. I almost pitied him. Almost. But then he laughed. That same dismissive laugh I remembered from college, the one he used when I told him I wanted to build something of my own. And just like that, the softness evaporated. I checked my watch. It was time. I signaled to our operations lead. Within minutes, Jacob's assistant approached him with a polite smile and a line I'd crafted myself. Hey, Jacob, Brielle needs a quick word upstairs. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes. He handed his kids off to his wife and walked toward the building, completely unaware of the guillotine waiting behind the elevator doors. I stood in the boardroom when he entered. The folder was already on the table. He frowned. What's this about? Sit, I said gently. He didn't, so I began anyway. Jacob Reeves, effective immediately, you are terminated from your role at Reeves Logistics for breach of executive conduct and violation of financial oversight policy. Your severance package is outlined in the folder in front of you, contingent upon your signature on the non-disclosure agreement. His mouth parted, but no sound came. He reached for the folder like it might bite him. "You don't have the authority to do this," he said finally, voice thin. I met his eyes. "I have the authority. I have the votes. And I have the evidence." A flicker of panic. "You're firing me today? At this event?" "Yes," I said. "In fact, your badge has already been deactivated. You'll be escorted out the side entrance in 15 minutes. You'll avoid the courtyard. We won't make a scene. Unless you do." His hands trembled as he opened the folder. "My sons are here." "I know," I said. "And someday if they ask why their father lost his company, I hope you'll tell them the truth." He stared at me like he wanted to scream. Instead, he sat down. Quiet. Beaten. I turned and walked out before he could find the words. And for the first time in years, the silence behind me felt like closure. He didn't come back outside. I watched from the second-floor window as the side entrance opened and Jacob stepped out alone, face pale, lips tight, the folder tucked under his arm like a final exam he'd failed. No wife? No kids. Just him. And the silence that followed him all the way to the curb, where a black SUV pulled up like it had been waiting for this moment too. I didn't move. I stood at the window and watched until the car disappeared. No one down below knew what had just happened. Not the engineers juggling toddlers, not the interns dancing to bad Top 40 remixes, not even the board members sipping lemonade near the cornhole station. The world kept spinning. The music kept playing. And Jacob Reeves was officially gone. Later that afternoon, the company Slack buzzed quietly with the announcement. Effective today, Jacob Reeves has stepped down from his role at Reeves Logistics. We thank him for his contributions and wish him the best in his future endeavors. It was the kind of message that floats past people, unless you know the story beneath it. Unless you know it wasn't a resignation. It was a reckoning. By Monday, his name was off the website. His desk was cleared. The brass nameplate was gone, replaced with a stack of quarterly reports and a branded stress ball. His parking space? Reassigned. His corporate email? Deactivated. Like he never existed. But oh, he did. And everyone who mattered would remember exactly how he left. The news spread slowly, first in hushed conversations, then through the business press, which caught wind of the leadership change and spun it into a vague, strategic shift. I gave no statement. I didn't need to. The headlines spoke for themselves. Minted CEO assumes control of struggling logistics firm in surprise merger deal. Silent takeover reshapes local tech scene. From basement to boardroom, Brielle Monroe's quiet conquest. One article called it a masterclass in stealth leadership. Another called it surgical revenge. I didn't flinch at either. What mattered was this: the man who once laughed at me, who belittled my ambition, who told me I'd never make it without him. He now worked for no one, owned nothing, and left his own company with a box and a security escort. Meanwhile, I sat at the helm of 2 thriving brands. My team respected me. My board backed me. And the empire I was told I'd never build? I was running it, with grace, fire, and no apologies. People often ask me how it feels to fire someone who once broke your heart. The truth? It feels like justice wrapped in velvet. Quiet. Precise. Unforgettable. It hit him 3 days later. I know, because that's when the text started. The first was short. No greeting, no punctuation. "Why did you do it this way?" I didn't respond. The second came a few hours later. "You couldn't just call? You had to humiliate me in front of my kids?" That one made me pause. Not because I felt guilty, but because of the irony. This was the same man who once told me that business wasn't personal, that feelings had no place in boardrooms, that stepping on people was just part of the climb. But now that he was the one stepped on, suddenly it was personal. The third text was longer. I always supported you in my own way. I pushed you because I saw potential. I never meant to hurt you. But what you did, that was calculated. That was cruel. He wasn't wrong about one thing. It was calculated. But cruel? Number cruel would have been leaking his incompetence to the press. Cruel would have been outing the vendor lawsuit I buried quietly for the sake of protecting his family's name. Cruel would have been dragging him down the way he once tried to drag me back in college, when he mocked my ambition and laughed when I said I'd be rich one day. Instead, I let him walk out with dignity. That was mercy, not malice. So I left his message unread. Marked it with a soft, deliberate silence. Because the truth is, Jacob didn't deserve an answer. Not anymore. Not after everything he dismissed, everything he overlooked. He wasn't asking for closure. He was asking for permission to play the victim, and I wasn't going to give him that. What he didn't realize, what so many like him never realize, is that power isn't about shouting the loudest. It's not about who speaks over whom. It's about who can afford to say nothing at all. I had said everything I needed to, just not in words. I said it when I built a company he couldn't see coming, when I walked into his boardroom without needing to announce myself, when I turned his legacy into a footnote. He'd spent years believing I was beneath him. Now, he couldn't reach me, not by text, not by title, not even by memory. I deleted his number that night. No drama, no speech, just a quiet click. It was over, not just for him, for me too. I didn't celebrate right away. There was no party, no bottle of champagne, no dramatic toast under a skyline. Just me, in my apartment, sitting on the floor with takeout noodles and a glass of wine that had gone slightly warm. My phone buzzed occasionally. Congrats from board members, investors, former colleagues who'd caught wind of the transition. But I didn't reply. Not yet. Because the moment wasn't about them. It was about me. The girl who once took the night shift at the bookstore to pay rent. The woman who cried on Maya's basement floor when her app crashed for the third time in 1 week. The founder who smiled through pitch meetings while men called her ambitious like it was a flaw. I needed to sit with her for a minute. The truth is, revenge stories always end with the power shift, the dramatic firing, the gasp-worthy twist. But what no one talks about is what comes after. The stillness, the echo. The question you ask yourself when the dust settles, was it worth it? I stared at the folder I'd brought home. Jacob's signed termination paperwork. I hadn't even realized I still had it in my bag. I placed it on the table, the black ink looking permanent in a way that felt strangely final. I thought I'd feel triumphant, or gleeful, maybe even smug. But I didn't. What I felt was clarity, the kind that only comes after you've cut the last tether to someone who once made you feel small. He was gone. But I wasn't just free of him. I was unchanged by him now. That was the real victory. He didn't make me. His doubt didn't define me. His words, his laughter, his petty little power plays. They didn't shape who I became. I did that. Every late night. Every rejection. Every hard decision. I didn't just become rich like I said I would. I became untouchable. And now, with my company thriving, my name respected, and my future no longer shadowed by his voice, I could finally do what I'd always wanted to. Build more. Because success isn't the finish line. It's the foundation. And this was just the beginning. It's strange how quiet peace can feel. Not the kind of peace that comes from stillness, but the kind that hums beneath your skin when you know you've finally put something to rest. The kind that doesn't need applause. That doesn't seek validation. That just is. 6 months have passed. Reeves Logistics is now fully integrated under Mint's umbrella, rebranded as Mint Freight Systems. Clean, modern, efficient. Everything Jacob's version never was. The irony? We kept some of his original infrastructure. Turns out, buried under the ego and mismanagement was a decent blueprint. It just needed the right leadership. Our profits doubled in Q1. Investors who once overlooked me are now asking for meetings I don't have time to take. The media loves the story. Female founder takes over failing tech firm and turns it into a market leader. I let them tell it however they want. Let them make it shiny. I know the real story. Last week, I ran into Jacob's ex-CFO at a fintech gala. He approached me cautiously, holding a drink like a shield. "You know," he said, "he still talks about you. Says you blindsided him." I smiled. He was facing the wrong direction. He laughed. A real one. "He never saw you coming." Number he didn't, but that was never the point. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. That chapter closed the moment he walked out of the office with a severance folder and no legacy left to protect. This was about reclamation. About becoming the version of myself I once only imagined. When I was broke, bruised, but building something in a basement while the world called me unrealistic. Now, I'm writing equity checks to startups led by women with wild ideas. I'm speaking at conferences I once sat in the back of. I'm creating policies at Mint that protect people like me. Those who are underestimated, dismissed, overlooked. The money's nice. The title, too. But the real win? Walking into every room knowing I don't need to prove myself anymore. I already did. To the one person who mattered most. Me. So, if you're wondering whether it's worth it, whether it's possible to rise after being doubted, dismissed, discarded, I want you to know, it is. You don't have to scream to be powerful. You don't have to win loud. You just have to keep building. Quietly, fiercely, relentlessly. Until one day, the people who laughed at your dreams are forced to sit down, shut up, and watch you live them. And when that day comes, smile, then turn around and keep going.